After making us wait for over a year, King Gizzard are back, and as we enter the first track of the album by the same name, Fishing for Fishies tells us a simple story of someone feeling guilty for fishing and continues our journey into the Gizzverse as we know it. But who is this person fishing, and is it the figure we know as Hantayumi? Well, yes and no. In my opinion, the track is depicting a time before Hantayumi became a cyborg and was a weary traveller who, as a mere mortal, is trying to survive the apocalyptic events left by Nonagon Infinity by hunting for food such as fish in the wild. But upon doing so, grows to despise himself and perhaps humanity in general for the unethical treatment of animals used solely for food, an act that has been described by the book Sapiens as humanity's worst crime in history, given animals were once caught in the wild but now live and die on a mechanized assembly line that humankind has created for them, even though many of us are no longer eating just to survive, but are actually eating in excess. Apart from the obvious vegetarian messages, which is also a way of life that Stu Mackenzie embraces, the feelings of no longer wanting to fish could also reflect an innate desire by the weary traveller to no longer be constricted by his human body, which requires food, and perhaps the search for how he can escape his organic form. Which leads into this interesting sequence from the music video, where we see the weary traveller dive into the river and come across a godlike statue who seems to give him a gift. In my opinion, the statue is of a figure who has the body of a human but the head of a fish, and this of course can just be a coincidence, but it might be referring to the 7 ancient demigods known as Apakalu, who were also believed to be part man and part fish, and interestingly originated from the river and not only controlled the plans of heaven and earth, but importantly were associated with wisdom and were believed to be sent by the gods to impart knowledge onto people. So perhaps this is the moment where Hantayumi, as the weary traveller, acquires the knowledge of becoming a cyborg, as it also fits into the themes we've seen previously, with seeking enlightenment by following where the river runs, and how Hantayumi as the weary traveller sought the knowledge of tetrachromacy, and thus leads him to coming across the knowledge of being upgraded to a cyborg and turning into this inorganic form. Boogieing on to the next track from the album, we get the song appropriately titled Boogieman Sam, the name of which could potentially be a nice nod to the song Sam's Last Boogie by the band Troutfish in America from their album Over the Limit, all of which again relate to the fishing aspect about this album. But the lyrics of Boogieman Sam tell of a different tale and focus on a character who causes mayhem by committing wild acts such as eating people's babies and shooting policemen. As we can see, Boogieman Sam is a character of chaos, who seems to enjoy doing whatever he likes and has no remorse for the consequences of his actions. But it's my belief that Boogieman Sam is someone Hantayumi comes across as a weary traveller, and upon doing so, begins to view humanity as a problem to fix, given all the mayhem humans unleash onto the world. and this potentially fits in with the broader message that the song is commentating on from the impacts of Western culture, since the song's name could be referring to Uncle Sam and hence the United States, who, just like the character Boogieman Sam, are often seen as a wild and dangerous society that seems to do whatever they please and with little regard for how their actions impact the rest of the world. This leads us into tracks such as the Bird Song, Plastic Boogie, and the Cruel Millennial, which thematically deal with aspects such as questioning the reality around us and coming to terms with how humanity is allowing technological advances to cloud their judgments when it comes to understanding how to preserve and protect the environment. Placing these tracks after Boogieman Sam suggests to me that after Hantoumi begins dwelling on the idea that humans could be the problem, he further questions his perspective on what humanity has done for the Earth and comes to believe that there is no hope left for humankind to continue, since it is likely that we will stay on this destructive path, which inevitably will destroy the Earth and everything that we know. Coming to the second last track from the album, we get the song Acarine, which puts the listener in the perspective of a honeybee struck down by some horrible parasite. The phenomenon being described is known as Acarine disease, which is where the song gets its name, but the parasite in question is the mite Acaripus woodi, which crawls into the breathing holes of bees, who then lose their ability to fly, suffocate, and eventually die. These lyrics also reinforce the idea noted previously of how Hantoumi views that humans are the problems, since in this case the honeybee is symbolic of Mother Nature, and the parasites are all of humankind, who just like the mites live and gets its food at the expense of the Earth, even though humanity will likely die once the Earth dies. But interestingly, as the song goes on, the music signals a shift from the album's sounds of boogie rock and into more of an electronic synth melody, which to me is signaling someone's transformation to become a cyborg, as not only are the lyrics symbolic of the death of humanity, but the music itself feels like a transition state from the organic sounds of country boogie rock into the digital electronic melodies of the synths. Which leads us perfectly into the conclusion of the album, known as Cyboogie. With these words, we are introduced to the birth of the character Cyboogie, who after being content as a human is now depressed with his transformation to becoming a cyborg. These words are perhaps commentating of how the process of becoming a cyborg might not be the best for humankind, who could very well likely decide to take this path in order for us to achieve aspects such as happiness, immortality, and divinity on this new agenda for the future. But for Cyboogie, the process of achieving immortality does not make him feel any happier. But who exactly is this character? Well, I'm going to propose that Cyboogie is actually Boogieman Sam, and not Hantayumi, since while this album seems to describe his transformation, we have already noted that this has occurred from the fourth colour from Polygondwonderland. But importantly, this would also explain why he's called Cyboogie, as it could very well be an abbreviated version of the cyborg Boogieman Sam, and is also supported by the lyrics from the song that urge Cyboogie to dance, which again is what Boogieman Sam is known for. However, these efforts do not work, as Cyboogie describes a feeling of chorophobia, or a fear of dancing, which could be symbolic of how he no longer feels like himself and doesn't even enjoy the activities he did as a human, such as fishing, to the point where he begins to question how it is possible to still feel depressed even though he has achieved immortality. But why has Boogieman Sam been turned into a cyborg, and importantly, who has transformed him? Well, this is where we reach the most interesting part that comes at the end of the song, but can only be heard in reverse. Yes, Hantayumi returns in his cybernetic form, but this time seems to be actually speaking to Cyboogie and is informing him on the brief history of humankind, and importantly commands him to go forth and dance with the devil, to which Cyboogie seems to say yes. The mention of which means to engage in risky or potentially immoral behaviour, which feels symbolic to embracing the ideas of playing God and cheating death by becoming immortal, through which Hantayumi has already achieved as a cyborg, and now similarly with Cyboogie, his creation. But this to me feels like a clever link back to the song Soy Protein Mutt Machine from Murder of the Universe, which also mentions Hantayumi and his cyborg creation, and would therefore place Cyboogie as this same machine. Which also connects back to the views Hantayumi shared as a weary traveller, that humankind was the problem, and that people like Boogieman Sam were better off being upgraded to their cybernetic counterparts, and perhaps, in the process, an effort for Hantayumi to try and regain the loss of humanity both figures feel, which we know is why he built the Soy Protein Mutt Machine in the first place. But if we know Hantayumi's creation has no love for the creator, why does Cyboogie seem to say yes to his commands at the end? Well, in my view, this takes place before Hantayomi murders the universe by fusing with Cyboogie, who initially may have tried to do as his creator told him to and live happily as a cyborg, but later realized he no longer could, since by achieving immortality it came at the cost of his humanity, to which Cyboogie forever blames his creator for. It's also worth mentioning that all such ideas are also brought up in the books Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind and Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow by Yuval Noah Harari. So perhaps after reflecting on these works, King Gizzard are cleverly creating an allegory with their songs that reflect the same notions about humankind's uncertain future. A future that is commanded by Hantayomi, who searches to regain his lost humanity and continues to seek the happiness that always seems to elude him. And as the album closes, we reflect on another glimpse into the Gizzverse and reach the conclusion for what we know for Volume 4. Until, of course, we get to Infest the Rat's Nest.
Why should people care about King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard?
People can care if they want to care. If they don't, that's cool as well. It's their choice, I suppose.
I don't know. They shouldn't care.